Hello there. I'm Nick Roush. That's Peter Thomas Fornatale. He's back by popular demand after crushing it at the Kentucky Derby. His horse Dermis Sotogake didn't come in, but if you followed him at all and in the money media, you heard them talking about Mage. JK was talking about Mage 2 weeks before. They had Ramiro Restrepo on before and after the Kentucky Derby win. Now Mage is going for another win in the second leg of the Triple Crown. PTF Pete, it feels so good to have just a Triple Crown runner. We haven't done this in 5 years. It feels like an eternity. I'm excited, and I love that you've got your Black Eyed Susans. You're in the Preakness spirit. I have never been to the Preakness, so what am I missing from the Pimlico experience?
I'll tell you what, it's a great, fun situation. Now, the facility itself is definitely a little on the outdated side, but what they've done is a tremendous job creating other hospitality options to really make it a party. And it's not your drunken uncle's Preakness. Yes, there is some of that going on, but it's not so much about the running of the porta potties in the infield anymore. R.I.P. Super Sky Point to Kegasis, but they do have a lot of like food stands and music. Bruno Mars playing after the races this year. They throw a tremendous party. First, do a great job. Their two biggest events now, Pegasus and Preakness. I want to get to every one of them I can because it's so much fun. But of course, it's a lot more fun when you cash a few tickets.
That's exactly right, and we're going to do our best to try to help you cash some tickets today. If you are in the Baltimore area, the DMV, I was looking up tickets, $120 for all you can drink in the infield. And you get to listen to Bruno Mars. So I may know some people who they upgraded their package when they went and they got the beer and wine all you can drink, and the and wine is very dangerous. So just be careful if you're heading up to Pimlico this weekend. I want to ask.
Please hydrate, people. That's all. Yes. The first race is like at 10:30. I mean, just look. I like getting after it as much as the next guy. You see the booze bottles there behind me, but it's a classic marathon, not a sprint. People, pace yourselves accordingly.
At the Oaks, I did not take my own advice, but at the Derby, the first drink I had when I got in the infield was a water bottle. So I was on the right page. I picked a lot more winners. We're going to pick some winners today, but I do want to ask you about the Derby, the race itself, because for a lot of people, we just kind of we look at PPs and we look ahead. We don't necessarily check a ton of replays or what the buyers were or anything after the fact. Was there anything about this race that surprised you that you didn't anticipate going into it?
I was pleasantly surprised by how fast it was. I really felt like we had multiple horses running races that could be winning Derby races in another year. And coming in, we weren't so sure who was going to step up. And we saw Mage step up in a big way. We saw Two Phils also run a huge race, being part of that early pace and still sticking on bravely at the end. And even Angel of Empire's run could have won a slightly subpar Derby. But I love the fact that we have the storyline we want to have, right? The Derby winner, uncontroversial Derby winner, no less, heading to Baltimore with a chance to annex the second jewel of this Triple Crown and hopefully setting up another giant party 3 weeks right here in my backyard, more or less, out at Belmont Park to go for the Triple Crown. As a racing fan, that's the story I want to see and be talking about. Of course, as a racing bettor, you can't always play it with the heart once.
You mentioned the speed too, and we spoke with Travis Stone. I believe it was Tuesday or Wednesday, the track announcer at Churchill Downs. You can watch that conversation here on the KSR YouTube channel. But he was like, It's 20 horse race. It's always going to be fast. So from now on, no matter how slow the prep races are, I'm always going to know that speed is going to play a factor in the Kentucky Derby, where it's a huge field. The Preakness field, not so much. Mage is the only starter from the Derby that's going to be in Baltimore. It's unfortunate we can't get the Forte Mage rematch because of the different rules, and then there was the failed draft. There's always a lot of stuff going on with horse racing, it feels like. But let's focus on the fun parts of it. And when I look at this race, if I take out just Derby winner, if you look at the past performances, Mage does look like the rightful favorite, but First Mission can certainly make a case for that as well. And 3 starts has 2 wins and up a great figure in that Lexington Stakes. Is First Mission? Are you going to try to beat Mage with First Mission, or is that still too chalky for your taste?
I think First Mission is definitely the interesting alternative. They did something really cool this year, and maybe it doesn't help you now, but it might help you for next year come Derby time. They did a Preakness future bet. So before the Derby, you could make a bet on the Preakness. And First Mission was in that betting and was a good price. So I supported him in that bet. So
I hate to interrupt you, Pete, but I listened to the Monster Pod. I was in on Preakness, put my on the wrong drag Cox horse. I went with the long shot instant coffee. And that's what happens when you play futures, you gotta, and this one was tough figuring out the field. So I like that you all did at least put that out there ahead of this race.
Now we have to decide, is he going to be a good bet against Mage, knowing everything we know now heading into Preakness Day? And the answer is it probably depends on what the market does, right? Sometimes you see the Derby winner so supported. If we see a 1-2 or 3-5 on Mage, I definitely think First Mission is going to have to be a better bet at the 5-2 or 3-1. He'd be in that scenario. If, however, the price is compressed somehow and you have an even money Mage against a 2-1 First Mission, all of a sudden the worm might turn. At this point, my official pick for the race is going to be First Mission. I like the fact that he still has all this upside with only the 3 starts. I love that he's been laid out for this race ever since the Lexington. And then looking at just the form, the fact that Disarm, a horse that ran a terrific race in the Derby to finish 4th, was in there well beaten behind First Mission. It suggests to me that First Mission not too far behind Mage, and maybe, just maybe, has that room to improve even more, given that this is just his 4th start and Mage is coming back in just the 2 weeks' time. So at the end of the day, the market will decide. But based on what we know right now, I think First Mission is an appealing alternative. And again, the fan in me, be happy to see Mage win. I will definitely be covering either in an exacta or some trifectas, a little bit of Mage over First Mission to hedge that First Mission position. But I mean, to me, it's these two and it's everybody else. I have a big gap between these top 2 and the rest of the field in the Preakness.
Now, I know a lot of people are going to be it's the Chad Brown thing, right? He's done this before. He gets the horse ready. It looks like it's going to be good for the Derby. He sits it. Cloud Computing wins. Last year, early voting wins. That's 2 winners in 5 years, give or take. And he does it again with Blazing Sevens. Is there something to this Chad Brown strategy, or is this horse just not have the form to be able to compete with the top caliber ones in this race?
Honestly, I think it's both. There definitely is something to it. Chad is so shrewd. He's so good at finding spots where his horses are going to fit and excel. So, I mean, it's no accident that he's done this before, and it's no accident that Blazing Sevens is going to be a much shorter price in the Preakness than he would have been had they gone to the Derby. That said, I just haven't seen the development from Blazing Sevens that I want to see for a horse that I think can beat 2 really fast horses in either Mage or First Mission. Would it be the first time Chad Brown has kicked sand in my face and made me question doubting him? No, it would not be the first time that happened. But for me, because of the narrative around Chad and this race, the same way there's a narrative around Bob Baffert and National Treasure in this race, I think these horses are going to catch money for reasons other than how fast they are. And I try to, the old keep it simple, stupid approach when it comes to horse racing. You try to find situations where you can actually get away with betting on the fastest horse. That's what I want to do here. And I think that from a fastest horse point of view, Blazing Sevens has too much to find for a runner that's probably only going to be on the order of 6-1.
Yeah, I do like that Blazing Sevens is out of the 7 hole. That should probably draw some more money out of it. You mentioned Baffert's horse, National Treasure. That horse feels like another one that we've seen its best days from behind him as a 2-year-old. Whereas on the opposite end, Red Route 1 is a horse that I liked as a potential Derby contender, a consistent board hitter that closed well, but he really bombed in the Arkansas Derby with the 6th place finish. Just didn't have enough, but came back a couple weeks later and won at 1 1/16 in a $200,000 race. So I don't know if there's enough early speed to set up for a closer in 1 mile in a 3/16 race. But Red Route 1 at 10-1 with a price that could grow, I'm going to have to take a little action on that one, Pete.
I'm intrigued too, and I think you hit on the key point about the price that this horse is going to be. And again, because there's a bet like the trifecta, we do not have to worry about him finishing ahead of the two market principals. He only needs to be able to pass the rest of them with the right kind of hold-up ride. I think there are, even with the questions, I mean, that last race was contested with Lasix. He won't have Lasix, the medication, on in this spot, but he's shown the ability to finish his races, and I think he could be running by some tired rivals. The idea of having trifectas that go 3-8 with 3-8 with 5, that sounds like a smart bet to me. That you know, just in terms of risk and reward, you're almost betting against those mid choices to try to get a runner like Red Route 1. Somebody's got to run third and fourth in here, you know, and they don't have to be within even a couple of lengths of those top two. So I think Red Route 1 is an intriguing runner in this spot. Again, almost more of a negative on some of the other competition than it is a specific positive on him. But I think you've identified correctly a very intriguing runner in this spot.
The way you put it too, Pete, is that it's kind of disappointing from a horse racing's fan perspective. And that's why I'm going to bring up the age-old take, because the Preakness typically has one of the lightest fields. You know, the Belmont, you'll get, especially with the New York connections, you'll get some big runners up there. And so each year, the kind of sports radio hack conversation is, do we extend the Triple Crown? Do we give horses more time? Because people don't like the 3 weeks in between, or maybe even the 5 weeks between the Derby and the Belmont is a lot more palatable for people not named Dwayne Lucas. But is there are you a traditionalist, or would it help the sport? Would it benefit the sport to give more time in between these Triple Crown races?
This is a terrible answer because it's so wishy-washy, but I'm kind of agnostic on the issue. I get the idea of these races on these days are 3 days that they handle a ton of money and they really work. And in horse racing, we don't have that much stuff that we can, you know, unequivocally in a business sense say that it works. So I get the idea of wanting to hold on to that. But at the same time, if the idea is to create rivalries and race the best of their generation against each other several times, I think changes could and should be made. I don't think you should have. I'm the biggest fan of the Travers. Love the Travers in Saratoga. It might be, if I were to pick a race to win as an owner, I'd have to think about making the Travers that race. But having like these restricted races for 3-year-olds only in August and beyond, you know, maybe that's not the way to do it. Maybe the grade 1 races for 3-year-olds should be these 3 races, and maybe they should be spaced in a way that you'd get the same horses competing in them, rather than giving a horseman so many other options to go and get their grade 1, either before the Derby in some of the big prep races or after in this extended series of 3-year-old exclusive races that goes all the way to September. So I can really argue it either way. In a theoretical world, I'd be intrigued to see what could happen with a new plan, but I'm scared in a sport where there's so few things you can just point to and say, hey, this works from a business point of view, in messing with that. So that's my wishy-washy response.
There is a lot of risk because, like you said, right now is the horse racing season. You know, I mean, I know you've got some playoffs happening in the NBA and NHL, but like that's when you turn on Saturday and you've got a big race sort of deal. Whereas I did like the theory that somebody on Twitter floated out where just make it the starting in May, first Saturday in May, first Saturday June, July. You just space them out to where the first Saturday of each month through the Breeders' Cup is a big race day. And that kind of gets on people's calendar. I think it could work, but if Justify and Pharaoh could do it in short order, I don't think that it's just this task that is undoable because of the breeding now, right? Like it could still be done, and you need horses that are good enough to do it, and that's not always the case. Not everybody can be a Triple Crown winner.
I'm also not sure that spacing it out wouldn't make it harder to win, right? Because you're going to have to face so many other of the best horses. So for me, it's less about trying to make it a winnable thing, which it clearly still is. But the optimist in me has some appealing notion to the idea of these real rivalries and having the same top 4 facing off against each other 3 times. That's from a guy whose job is to market horse racing. Like, that's really exciting. From a guy who loves studying form and trying to be half clever about what's going to happen in these races, having them run against each other more, like, that's exciting. So it really is. It is a tricky one, and I don't know that anything's going to happen anytime soon. But I will say this: if the trend continues the way it has over the last several years, where we have one coming back or a healthy Derby winner passing like last year, I do think it is. This conversation isn't going anywhere, and something may come of it at some point.
Well, hopefully in a couple weeks we'll be discussing a potential Triple Crown run. Maybe not. Probably won't fill our pockets as much this Saturday, but you'll love it for the sport, especially after such a rough week from a fatality standpoint at Churchill Downs. I really was hoping we'd get that Mage Forte rematch. Maybe we'll get it at Belmont Park. Maybe.
Not impossible. Not impossible. Todd Pletcher's backyard, and certainly a track that Forte loves. I know he'd love to be able to show the world what his horse can do. It may have to wait for down the line. At this point, who knows? Maybe they'll reboot with him and look for more of a summer campaign. But the ears to the ground, and it's one of the things we'll be covering over at our shows on inthemoneypodcast.com. And hey, man, anytime you want to talk racing, you invite me on. Though I'm used to being the only guy with the hat. We have to talk about this.
Oh yeah, I had to bring out my best for PTF over here. Remember, inthemoneypodcast.com is where they have all their stuff. I'm subscribed to them on Apple Podcasts. You can find them wherever you get your podcasts. Plenty of content, and you also have a Plus site, correct?
Yes. We have even more stuff. We do a ton for free, inthemoneypodcast.com and our YouTube channel, but we have an In the Money Plus area where, for example, we'll have extra coverage of the undercard races on Preakness. We'll have a whole thing on the Friday, the Black Eyed Susan Day on the Plus side. inthemoneypodcast.com/plus, the place to go for that. You also can get little digests for all the picks. And maybe most important of all, by supporting us that little extra bit, it keeps us from having to put like all these ugly pop-up ads on our website. So there's that too.
Is there any horses maybe in the Black Eyed Susan or the undercard that really jump out at you on the program?
Well, the one that jumps out in the Black Eyed Susan, unfortunately, is going to be short and at the top of the market, and that's FISA coming in from California for Bob Baffert. This is a filly who's been good for a while, but last time showed a lot better on the clock. It wasn't just with the eye. She really took that step forward. I think she's an uncommonly good runner for a race like the Black Eyed Susan. I'm a huge fan in there at a price of a filly called Sacred Wish. I would not want to stake my whole day on Sacred Wish down in the one hole because the trip could go wrong. But with John Velasquez in the irons, I'm hoping he can get her off that rail, not get too, crowded down in there, get a good run through, and maybe come in and land in some trifectas with FISA. So FISA, Sacred Wish in some sort of combination is my idea there. And then in terms of the undercard, I thought Saturday looked a little bit chalky to me, but there were some spots where I thought you might be able to get a little bit interesting. In the 12th race on Saturday, Wesley Ward has a horse called Funtastic again that I think, usually you think of him sprinting. This race is going a mile, but this horse, Funtastic again, has the pedigree to excel on the turf. And I think adding Lasix in this spot because it's a non-graded stake, second time off the layoff after running in a very live-looking stakes race at Turfway, the one the two fills came out of, I think Funtastic again could make some noise in the 12th race. So those are a couple of the things on the Friday and the Saturday I'm looking at. Again, we'll have full coverage. We're doing a live stream tonight, and there'll be tons of stuff over on the network if folks want to check that out.
Well, Pete, I appreciate you joining us once again. It's fun talking horse racing. I admittedly have a little post-Derby depression that I have to get over, and fortunately we don't have to wait long for a big race weekend at Pimlico for the Preakness Stakes. So Pete Fornatale from In the Money Media Network. Make sure you're following him at Looms Boldly on Twitter. Pete, it's always a pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us.
Nick, the pleasure was mine, and keep those spirits up because it's going to keep the train keeps rolling. Belmont, Royal Ascot, Saratoga. This is the good time to be a racing fan.